Rapport family. It's your boy Mike G. I'm here with C Dub. We got a special guest for you guys today. Auburn quarterback from 2008 to 2009. 2009 first team All SEC quarterback Chris Todd. Chris, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Chris. So listen, we're super excited to do this interview with you today. And we wanted you to take us through a little bit of your journey from Texas Tech under Mike Leach to starting quarterback at Auburn in 2009. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like playing under Mike Leach in the air raid offense? And, I think Graham Harrell ended up winning the job there, and then you transferred out. But, you got some time in this system. You threw some passes in that system. Can you take us through your Texas Tech journey?
I definitely learned a ton at Tech. So, I went to Texas Tech out of high school. At the time, they were leading the nation in everything passing-wise. We were running a very similar offense in high school. So, I had a good idea of what was going on before I went in. But really, my growth from high school to college, most of it happened. Well, a lot of it happened there, at least a transitional period. And one of the biggest things was, now I was in the meetings with Leach every day, but Lincoln Riley, who's the head coach at Oklahoma now, he was the quarterback GA, and so I would, when me and Harold started competing, if I wasn't about to let him do something that I wasn't doing, so anytime he was watching film, I was trying to watch film, I was trying to watch extra, and every time I went in there, the guy that I watched film was Lincoln, and Lincoln would. He would basically go into a film room and he would turn on a tape and we'd pause it right before a snap and tell me, he's like, what do you see? And so like on a daily basis, we would go through games and I would see a defense and I would be looking at leverage. I would look at coverages. I would look at, matchups. And then he would ask me what routes I liked. And so it was really kind of looking at from a coach's perspective, what route would be good versus, different defenses, different looks that they were giving us. And what it ultimately enabled me to do was, and this was really kind of Leach's expectation, was when you went on the field, he gave you a play and it was a strong recommendation for what you should do. But if it was a bad look, he expected you to change it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, that was a huge growth process for me, is just kind of learning the game and what coaches were looking for. Now the other parts, there's a lot of entertainment sitting in a meeting with Leach every day, just because he said so much crazy stuff. But I do know the man, one of the, I can't tell you that story. But one of the first, probably, I guess, couple weeks that I was in there, just a random person calls his phone. So it's like the wrong number. And he's like, hey, hold on, guys, I got to answer this. He steps out the door into the practice field and he comes back like an hour later. And he was like, yeah, wrong number. But he ends up talking to this random person for an hour, like during the quarterback meetings. But so like the Leach meetings were always entertaining. But I tell you, the guy was super, super intelligent. He had weird ways of telling you stuff, but he had that kind of, I don't know, like genius quality of oversimplifying something that's really complex. And so that was, I learned a lot there. And I don't know if that completely answers your question, but Texas Tech was, I learned a lot there.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that Leach actually gave you some autonomy to get out of bad plays if you saw something in the defense, right? I want to ask you a question, though. I want to pivot to fundamentals. What was his emphasis, for quarterbacks? Did he focus on fundamentals? Did he focus on footwork, stepping into throws, squaring your shoulders, Was there a big emphasis on fundamentals under Mike Leach?
Yeah. So, well, to answer the first part of your question, autonomy, I think that is the autonomy that Leach gives his quarterbacks. I think is one of the things that separates them so much. Now he throws the ball a lot, and that's kind of what people see as different with his offenses. But that autonomy of the person that's on the field with the best view, he gives them the leeway to make the best choice. And it's not so prideful that they have to run what he calls. So, that's really the genius in it. It's that there's some other parts of it too, just the the variables that can be made, or changes that can be made in each play. Like 4 verticals, for example, you could run 1,000 different ways. So with one play, it could end up being a bunch of different things. But the autonomy that he gave the quarterbacks was huge. I mean, it's just, if there were 5 men in the box, you knew you were running 30 up the middle. The center was blocking over, the guard was coming underneath. If you had inside leverage, if your outside backer was too far inside, we were getting an out route or a sail route or something on the outside. So that to me was what really separated them and allowed them to throw the ball as much as they do, because you don't have to call a perfect play all the time. Yes, that's really interesting. So kind of that offense in general, it's not just Leach, it's kind of spread across the country. And the way they put that offense together, I mean, there's real genius in it when you go back and look at, how Leach was a part of some of that original crew. I think it was Iowa Wesleyan, where they were originally at before I think they went down to Valdosta. But the way they put that offense together was pretty impressive. The fundamentals kind of came, at least as far as I'm aware of, like they really hit it hard at Kentucky. They might have been doing it before, but they really, really, really stressed footwork and being able to develop a quarterback that way. Just, the hot feet, always continuously moving in the pocket. You do a lot of pocket work, a lot of bag work in practice. Just a lot of drills. So yes, there was a lot of fundamental work with that offense in general. Now Leach kind of took it his own way. When I got out there, it was surprising on how much we didn't do as compared, because we were running some of that offense in high school and we did a lot of the fundamentals, and a lot of my footwork had been developed before I even went out there. He had some key things that he wanted you to do a certain way, and he would tell you that in a meeting. But I'll tell you one of the best things that I heard from Chris Hatcher. I don't know if y'all have heard that name, but he's a head coach at Sanford now. See, I think you're in Birmingham.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So he's there in Birmingham. He was the quarterback coach at Kentucky when he was drafted number 1. And so I started going to train under him, I guess probably about 8th grade. And I followed him when he hit to Valdosta and trained with him there, just in like the big camps. But I would get tutelage from him. And I called him back years later, and he really stopped doing a lot of the arm mechanics, and he really strongly focused on the footwork. So footwork became really big with him. And then Leach, he was similar. And going back to Chris Hatcher, I called him up one day because I was working with a kid, and I was like, "Hey, I'm really trying to figure this out. Like, what do you do arm motion wise?" And he was like, "Honestly, man, I recruit guys that can already throw, and I don't do much with arm mechanics."
Oh, wow.
So most of what I do, he's like, I just kill footwork. And so I said, okay. And so really that's kind of what Leach was doing, was he wanted you in a good position to throw, because a lot of it was progression movement, across the field when you were reading plays. And so he wanted you to be in a good position. And, he would have those little comments, like if you miss this way, miss that way, he'd say, do this, but it was kind of subtle. And in Lincoln Riley, who I was talking about earlier, he's really the one that took over, and we actually started doing quite a bit of footwork and fundamentals probably about my second year there, and he kind of took control of that.
So Chris, in your opinion, and from what I heard, it sounds like you do work with kids playing the quarterback position. When you find a kid who's inaccurate as a QB, how fixable is that in your opinion?
So some of that depends on the kid. I don't look at many kids as unfixable. Now the biggest problems you run into is if somebody's got a really funky motion, or they got a hitch in their throw, that type of thing. Like sometimes, especially if it's deeply ingrained, that can be difficult to overcome, just because you have to apply enough reps to overcome that, those neural connections in your brain. And so it's just, you have to do it a bunch. And if a kid's willing to work on his own in between sessions, then that can happen a lot quicker, obviously. But it can be difficult if he's only doing it when he's with you. But that's really everything, whether you're training for basketball or training for football or anything else. But just the accuracy part, like a lot of times I see that as fixable. Usually it's a really small thing, especially if you've got a kid that's already got talent. Like he has arm talent. I've got a kid that's a starting quarterback in high school up here in Kentucky, and great arm talent, like really good baseball player, started playing varsity in 8th grade. And it can really throw it. But that was one of the things. He was getting a lot of pressure the year before. And we hadn't worked together because I'd been down in Alabama. And so and accuracy became a thing. And so really it was the fix is simple. I kind of take it, I've taken some of my stuff from the past and applied it to, I did some boxing training in the past. And I don't know if you all have done boxing training, but when you punch, a lot of people think you're punching from out here or here. And those jabs are straight, you're going straight at it and you're straight here. And so I like to call it directional momentum. And so when you're in the pocket, like it starts with the inside of that back right foot, like you're on a pitcher's mound and you're pushing off of that. And whatever your target is, you want as much of your momentum going directly at that target as you can, put together and get going that way. And so if you can get that fixed, like I said, it is simple, but you have to be able to see it and spot it and see what they're doing. And when you see a guy that's inaccurate, usually, in my opinion, it's because that's not happening. Usually, like if you'll watch a guy take a drop, let's say he's throwing, a deep out to the left. When he takes a drop and that left foot comes around to point at his target, a lot of times that momentum in your drop will take a guy and he will fall further to the left, which will make him miss to the left. And so being able to, you're working with the kid to get back, stick his toe in the ground and get his directional momentum going straight at a target really improves that accuracy very quickly. And so that to answer your question is really how I see it. I mean, at the end of the day, I want kids to make the same throw as often as they can. Like whether it's a deep end, like a dig or a post or a hitch, like make the same throw. Like your foot sticks in the ground the same way, you push off it the same way, your arm comes through the same way, you fall through the same way, everything's the same. And if you can make that happen, you're going to be very consistent.
So Chris, so we talked about, everything that happened with you at Texas Tech under Mike Leach. You learned kind of how to read defenses. There was a strong focus on footwork, in his system. He gave you guys the autonomy to get in and out of plays. Obviously we know what kind of success Graham Harrell had at Texas Tech. So you transfer out, you go to junior college, and then you come into Auburn, right? You've got shoulder surgery, and you did what I thought was one of the most impressive feats. And I've been watching Auburn football for a long time, in that you won a starting job without a spring, without two straight springs, right?
Yeah.
I want you to take us through that, because you have a unique perspective. You were actually Gus Malzahn's first QB at Auburn.
Correct.
Right. You were his first QB. And he comes in, he gets hired. You didn't know Gus at all. So
I was a guy off on the side. He's like, that's what those people.
Well, you had, like I said, you come in, Gus doesn't know you at all, right? And you have shoulder surgery, and so you miss that second spring, and we're going into that fall. And that's where I want you to pick this story up for us. Like, can you take us through that QB race and what that was like for you, and what the communication was like for you leading up to winning the starting job?
No, so just to start this, I still vividly remember. I remember a time after one of the early spring practices in 2009, and I was just outside the complex. It was, I think it was just after practice, and I was just running through stuff in my head, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I was like, because at the time. So like you said, in 2009, I had surgery in the Christmas of 2008. So I was out in spring ball, didn't do hardly anything in the summer. And when you're out that long, especially with the new staff, like I just wasn't a part of stuff. Like I didn't go through drills, and realistically, I was probably fifth on the depth chart. I was at the bottom just because I wasn't doing anything. And so when I got put in, like, it wasn't like, hey, we respect you for what you did before. It was like there were two practices. It was I think they called the Auburn practice and the Tiger practice. And one of the practices was the starters, like second string, like people that would play in a game. the guys going into the season that they were expecting to get a lot of playing time. And then the other practice was for, freshmen, underclassmen, people that walked on scout team, like that type of stuff. So I was with them, like the second group. So I wasn't really like when all the cameras were coming out and people were paying attention to practice, talking with the quarterback race. I starting 2009 camp, like I literally just wasn't in it. And so I just came out there one day and I was like, man, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. And I ran this through my head and, I was considering all the options and I was like, man, dude, like you've to put in all this work for all this, for all this time. And it just ends like this. Cause I saw no way of being able to make up to the next practice. And then even if I did, there wasn't enough time to compete and convince people that I was the guy. And I still remember sitting there and saying, dude, man, I mean, you have the option to quit. Like you can just stop. And yeah, that, you'll have a pretty good excuse for why you did because, everything's up against you, but you're also going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. I mean, you don't have too much longer to stick this out. If you do, I was like, so you really got no choice, man. Like, I was literally just talking to myself. I was like, dude, you got to keep going. Just go. And coincidentally, like very soon, maybe the next day or two, they decided to give me a shot in the practice with the 1s and 2s. And I had a good one, and then they let me stay. And I had another good one. They let me stay. And then they said, hey, let's give them first team reps. And I guess I showed them something in that short amount of time. But I think it was about 9 practices through fall camp that I had an opportunity to do something and won the job in.
So, Chris Todd, you win the starting job. You are the quarterback for the 2009 season. Gus Malzahn is your QB coach. Now, you walked us through what was it like being in a film room with Mike Leach. You talked about what he emphasized and what he stressed. What was it like being Gus Malzahn's QB? What were some of the things that he emphasized, whether it was fundamentals, how to read coverage? What was some of the things that Gus Malzahn was a stickler for in 2009 as his first quarterback?
Gus, when starting, I guess, the season. And we're comparing this to like what Mike Leach would do at Texas Tech. Gus was much more process oriented. I would say that he was more of the detail guy. I would say, and what I mean by that is with like the Leach system, the whether you want to call it the air raid or whatever people are running from Holgerson at Houston to Neil Brown at West Virginia or the guys that were at Cal. I mean, this offense is run all over the country. It's much more progression oriented, and so you're especially a deeper pass, like your 5-step from under center passes. Those were you're going to have 5 guys out on a route at any given play, and so it was about getting back in your drop. And then, kind of keeping hot feet and moving in the pocket and going through those progressions and reading them. Coach Malzahn's offense was much more run dominant, and then the passing game was built off of the run game. And so, a lot of his stuff is out of shotgun, but it's really like a power eye from the shotgun. And so you're just moving the quarterback back, you're moving one of the running backs over. Both the running back. The tailback over and the fullback will usually be right or left rather than just directly behind the quarterback.
Your H-back.
And so, yes. Yeah. So a lot of Coach Malzahn stuff, which was different from me than it was at Texas Tech and even in high school. A lot of his plays were more timing based. And so it was a lot of play action. So you're running the ball, you're running power inside zone, whatever you're running. And then you're doing play action passes. And that can be very effective. You run the ball, getting linebackers to come down, and you're throwing routes in behind it. So that's really, he hounded on that a lot. Like he was, he wanted a play fake. He wanted 1, 2, 3, stick your toe in the ground and let the ball out. And if we're doing inside zone, like he wanted that right foot turned at 45 degrees. He wanted you to stick the ball in his gut. He wanted you to ride it, stick with the left foot. And then when you were carrying out your fake, he wanted you to step with the right, going past the running back after you handed the ball off. So like I said, Coach Malzahn, he was very detail oriented, and really the biggest difference to me was the timing aspect. And honestly, that's really what I gained the most knowledge in, which because it was so different for me, was doing a play fake, taking a 3-step drop, and sticking the toe in the ground and letting it rip. It was and when I say timing, it's, when I take my 3 steps out of shotgun, somebody's running a post route, bang 8 on the outside, they're sticking the toe at 10. When I hit my last step, they should be hitting their last step and the ball's coming out. And so a lot of his stuff was more time oriented. And that was what we talked about a lot. Now we also spent a lot of time on quarterback responsibilities. Now when we were talking about at Tech with Coach Riley, who's at Oklahoma, those were his stuff were like, we would get up there, we would see defense, you would have a play call, and if you didn't like it, you're switching to something different. Coach Malzahn, on the other hand, they were doing, I guess they were more involved in that process. So, you see them, they'll do a play and sometimes you'll pause, look at the sideline and check. So he's doing more of that checking for you. So your responsibilities were more in the process of getting everybody prepped. So making sure everybody's lined up, getting people in the right position, calling out blocking. So I would do that, having to tell all the offensive linemen, get the running back ready, pass along the play, the formation to both sides on the receivers. And so memorizing all that, what protection went with what play, what potential changes need to be made, pre-snap, that type of thing.
So, Chris, in everything you just said, take us through a play call, because you're saying, in the air raid under Mike Leach, right? You were given some autonomy to get in and out of plays, right? And I would like you to help us educate our listeners a little bit on what it's like for a QB and a Gus Malzahn from offense from play call to snap, right? Can you take us through that process? You look to the sideline, he gives you a play. What happens if you see something maybe you don't like? Did you learn any of that, in this offense? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, so typically with Coach Malzahn, at least while I was with him, now you have to understand I was the first guy there, and so I would think typically, you go more in depth and you update what you're doing as you're at a school longer. Especially if you come in and you got a kid that's a sophomore and you have him for 3 years. I was the first guy, so I'm not saying that this is what they ended up doing, but typically in a play, I'm looking to the sideline. Coach Malzahn he emphasized pace a lot. Like he wanted fast. He wanted us to play fast, and so like I was very responsible for keeping that speed. And if I didn't, I would hear him on the sideline, and sometimes in that stadium, which is crazy, but. Yeah. No, he was just constantly, run it. I don't know if y'all heard that before. Yeah. But he was constantly emphasizing pace. And so, as soon as the play is over, getting your eyes to the sideline. So boom. And then usually somebody would be giving you, a formation, which is fairly typical. The quarterbacks don't always relay that information. We did. So we're making sure everybody got lined up the way they needed to, communicating that verbally most of the time to both sides. And then it was coming in and after that, I would get the play call with that. And so after the formation is set up, you get the play call, and they would be getting the play call. So I didn't necessarily have to call that out, but I had to know what protection, let's say, was associated with that pass play. And so when I got the play call, I would go up and then, start with the left tackle and move all the way over to the right tackle. And, if it's a fairly quiet game, then you could just do that from, pretty much the same spot. But, if you're playing at, Tennessee or, Alabama, LSU or something, and it's super loud, like Tennessee was one of the more difficult places to do that. Like sometimes you have to be, a foot from each guy's ear and relay that protection call, relay the protection call, relay the protection call, relay the protection call, relay the protection call. And then you're coming back to the running back and then make sure he knows it. And at that point, you're backing up, you get in your depth to take the snap, and then you're kind of looking up and doing your pre-snap routine of, okay, I see this coverage, this is the play we got. Okay, I think the safety on the the boundary safety, he looks like he's cheating forward, so I think we can hit this in behind him or whatever. So that's pretty much the process we went through.
So Chris, it's been said about Gus that Gus does not like to throw over the middle. And there's just certain parts of the field that he avoids the QB throwing. Having played in this system, can you attest to that? Is there any truth to that?
I would say that I would say that a lot of Coach Malzahn's passing game is a lot of it is not necessarily directed towards the middle. Now there are plays that you can get over the middle, but like I said before, like his offense, the way he put it together, going back to I think the Maryland running game, where he put that kind of piece that and then added the passing game with it. You know, a lot of his passing game was play action passes, and there was some quick game to go with it, not a ton. And then you had your screens and stuff to go with that. A lot of his was, like I said, play action. You're trying to get a linebacker to bite, and you're trying to hit stuff, back behind a linebacker under, catch a safety rolling down, that type of thing. So, a lot of that is, you're throwing posts, you're throwing digs, you're throwing, a corner route to it like a cover two rather than throwing the post into a cover two, a high cover two, deep curls, a deep double post. Then, you have your double slants where you can potentially throw the ball over the middle. But, a lot of times that's where, a backer's crashing down an inside slant, and you're going to hit the outside guy. There were some dig routes, and we would throw those. We would throw them some. But really, honestly, the plays that we were best at weren't necessarily passes over the middle. And some of that would be offensive play calling. Like, we talk about we've been talking about Leach. So that, I think that's probably when people think of the spread, like that's the spread. And so we're comparing Gus's offense to the spread. Are there as many passes over the middle in Gus's offense as there are in the air raid or what Leach does? And the answer I would say no. And I think probably why that is when the air raid was originally put together, it was very tight end dominated. And so it was back in the day, we did a lot of two running backs in the backfield and a tight end. And what I mean by a tight end, so he's not even standing up, like they're on the end of the line of scrimmage, outside the tackle. And so when you had that, and when I say tight end dominated, a lot of the routes had a tight end as a main guy, and using that big guy who could run as a mismatch. They had, you'd have out routes with the tight end. You had stick routes with the tight end, 5 yards turnaround. You had the dig route, with the shallow, so you're reading that over the middle. You're running wide cross, which tons of people run now, where you're trying to get a tight end, under and then over another backer and hit him at 17 to 22, with the hash or outside. So that offense, it's just with it being tight end oriented, I think like the way it happens is there's a lot of stuff there. And the way Gus's offense is set up is just, that play action passing game, not as many passes are set up to where you're, getting one-on-ones with guys in the middle.
So, Chris, kind of in line with that, right? One of the big criticisms of Gus's offense was that the route trees left a lot to be desired for receivers. We've had former receivers who did go on to the NFL say that, hey, we never really ran complicated routes in college, right? Gus's system didn't prepare us. Now, you said that, again, if we didn't utilize the middle of the field a ton, right? And another criticism of the offense is that it did not take advantage of tight ends that we've had come through the years, right? Do you feel like not using the middle of the field limited you guys offensively?
That's a good question. I think it would be easy to make that argument. I mean, whenever you cut something out when you don't have something that works for a lot of people, I think it's easy to sit there and say that it limited you. Like I said, if I was looking at the things that I learned, and I think we did well with Gus, he did really well at, working the boundary, working the sidelines, getting high lows, whether that's, post out, whether it's curl, flat, whether it's, corner out, whether it's, your go out, which is a lot of people. He did a lot of stuff to work that part, and he was really good with the timing part of the passing game. I think where you can potentially run into issues there is just if you run into a coverage that doesn't work. if you're coming down, your progression 1 is not open, and then you're kind of work down to 2 or 3. There's less progressions to move through. But I will say this: there are plenty of offenses out there that are like that. I know when Ensminger took over after Franklin was fired in 2008. I was learning a new offense there, and their offense was somewhat like that. You had Borges with a power out running game and a lot of their passing game, and I've talked to some of those guys that played receiver then, and they did do some things differently, but just in general, you have this air raid that has a progression that five guys in a route, and doesn't really matter what defense comes out. You're really looking for grass, and then you can throw different things or make checks based off of what coverage you get. Now, a lot of other people take the approach that they call 2 different routes in a play, and so they're calling this over here on the right side of the field, they're calling this on the left side of the field, and then based off the coverage, if you come out and you get cover 3, you're going to the right side of this route. If you get a 4 look or a 2 look, you're going to the left side of the field. And a lot of people are successful at doing that. And so, I think that's really the biggest difference. Now, you talking about the complexity of those routes.
Right.
I mean, we ran with Gus's offense. I mean, we ran a full route tree. At Texas Tech, we didn't call it a route tree. So we weren't really basing routes off of that. Now, we ran all those routes and some of them were different, and we did those a different way. But Gus had all the routes in a route tree, and we had those in plays, and I would say that I threw all of those multiple times. The complexity part of it, I think, is adjustments based off of what coverage you were getting. If you're sitting there and a DB's getting deep, then can you check it up? Or if he's squatting and you can beat him over the top, are you doing that? Or based off of this coverage, are you adjusting and doing this route? What I would say there is, before Gus got to Auburn at Tulsa, he was doing some of that with those routes. Example being, if you got a bang 8 going into cover 2 that's not good, then you could adjust that and get a route working to the outside to hit in the hole for cover 2. We didn't do it. We did a little bit of that when I was there, but I think if you're at a place for several years, you can do more of that.
So in Gus Malzahn's offense, as a QB, you want to develop, go pro. As quarterback under Gus Malzahn, you learn how to look at a defense. Of course, you get a call, but you also understand the protections for the defense, how they're flanking you. The responsibilities that you laid out. There was a lot of things that you learned as a QB coming from Texas Tech. If you're not a JUCO, or if you're not someone transferring in, you're coming from high school, how difficult it is for a kid who's been given limited responsibilities to fully develop to where they can perhaps get to the next level, in your opinion?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, he does have an example of that. I mean, the guy that came in after me went pretty high in the draft. But to what you said, he did transfer in. So we can make, I guess you could make that argument. So with Gus, I wouldn't think that there's like a ton of like a much smaller amount of responsibilities that you were doing pre-snap. It was kind of hard to see what my responsibilities were at Tech, because like I did them so much. Like I said, when I was watching film with Lincoln almost on a daily basis, like I was seeing that stuff over and over and over and over and over and over. And so, the pre-snap routine didn't necessarily feel process oriented, although I guess it was. So I made a lot of checks and changes, and easy, like my redshirt freshman year playing in games that year, like I made checks when I went in, which is kind of crazy, but I just done it so many times. You know what they are and you do it. With Gus, like I said, one of the difficulties with kids a lot of times, whether it's a kid coming out of high school or a kid coming out of college, one of the pros, is the under center stuff. And that used to be much bigger in the NFL. Like, kids in shotgun all the way through college struggled sometimes. And mainly because, getting depth from under center and then being able to transition your weight from that last step and make a good, accurate throw, which we were talking about earlier. Now, to that degree, I think Gus does pretty good. You know, he does a lot of the timing routes, and so when I was training afterwards, you know, I had to do some under center 5-step, under center 7-step, which we didn't do a lot with Gus, but you know, a lot of the stick my toe in the ground and let the ball out, like I'd done a ton of that, so I didn't have a big issue there. You know, you could make a case for, you know, if a kid's coming out and he's, you know, sitting down with John Gruden, he's like, you know, draw this play up, tell me what you're thinking, that type of thing. We didn't do a whole lot of checks based off of defensive fronts. Like my little brother was at Louisville under, I think it was Watson, his freshman year. And I would talk to him about some of the stuff they were doing. And they did more, and I bring him up because I think they were more kind of NFL-ish.
Right.
They did more of coming out, reading the front, counting the guys in the box, and making changes, which are a lot of things that you see NFL guys do on Sunday. Whether it's 52 is the mic, or, you know, this is Roger here, this guy's coming, that type of thing. You are calling protections with Gus. I think it's possible within what he's doing to do that. We did have some plays where, you know, if you had a 1 technique or a 3 technique, the offense was set up to where you could make those changes. You know, a lot of time they maintain that responsibility in the box or from the sideline, at least that first year with me. But I think it was within the capabilities of the offense for some of those things to happen. Now, a lot of the offensive line calls where the quarterback is responsible for relaying the protection and making sure that the protection was correct based off of what the play was. And, you know, that you're telling all the linemen what to do, and you're making sure the running back's on the correct side, you know, whether he's got to, you know, block left or play fake and come across, whatever he's doing. But past that point, a lot of that was put on the center and making those calls. And there's a lot of offenses like that. So to answer your question, yeah, you know, I think someone coming out of his offense is capable of being prepared with doing enough at least to prep them for the pre-NFL preparation, which is more stuff. But I think what a lot of people, I think the development maybe where I guess where this question leads, the quarterback development.
You are watching part 1 of the War Rapport's interview with former Auburn quarterback Chris Todd. As always, like and subscribe and stay tuned for part 2.